Welcome back to another lesson on experimental design. This one we're going to talk about between versus within subjects design.
Let's go!
If you're planning a usability test with 2 prototypes, we could do several things. 1, test each prototype independently with different participants. Or 2, test both prototypes with the same participant. Now, if you're testing them independently, this is something called between subjects design. Participants are seeing both prototypes. This is called within subjects. Just for funnies, I'm gonna throw more jargony confusion at you, because I want you to suffer. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm just kidding.
It's because I want to prepare you for the real world, which consists of people using way too many terms for the same thing. And that's why you're taking this class, so I can cut the BS. So here goes. Between subjects design is also known as between groups or independent measures. Within subjects is also known as within groups or repeated measures. Now, for the purpose of this masterclass, and honestly, let's make the world a simpler place by using the same term, I'm gonna stick with using the words between and within subjects. Since they're dense words and people always get them mixed up like me, I came up with some terrible analogies to help you remember which one's which. For between subjects, remember, between subjects is when participants independently experience your conditions separately, right? Let's say you have 2 prototypes. One person takes a prototype and another person takes the other prototype. Each person does not see both. So anyway, within subjects design, I like to imagine a river that's in between 2 lovers standing across from each other. The lovers never interact because they're separated by a river that's in between them. Hashtag sad story.
Hashtag get better hashtags.
I told you these are dumb. Now for within subjects design, all right, this is when participants experience multiple treatments or conditions or prototypes in that case. Imagine you have multiple superpowers within yourself, which you all do. You get to activate all of them. That's the power within. So go forth, badass UX leader. Unleash all your powers.
With great power comes great responsibility.
I hope it helps because I always forget, is between subjects the one where they do both anyway. Between subjects, something comes in between them, prevents people from interacting with another thing. Within subjects, you have multiple powers within you. You get to use them all, okay? So those are my analogies. I don't know, right? If you can come up with a better way to remember, I'm all for it. Kevin, is one design better than the other? Is within subjects or between subjects better? Well, I'm glad you asked, young Padawan. Anytime we ask if something's better than another, expect a conversation about pros and cons. Let's break it down then. Between subject studies, the pros are there are no order effects, learning or fatigue effects that might bias the second condition. And what I mean by that is if you're doing a between subject, that means participants are only seeing one variation and they only see one variation. So they don't get tired, you don't get any order effects. Order effects meaning one variation affects the perception of another. Since they're only seeing one, you don't get that. Shorter sessions, that's another pro because people only see one. Third, between subject studies are kind of easier to set up because you only have to set up one thing. You don't have to worry about order effects. Now the cons of between subjects are that you may need a larger sample size because participants only see one condition. If you want enough power or statistical significance to compare these 2 groups, if multiple variations, then you need a larger sample size. Another con is that there may be individual differences that may affect the result. Of course, there's always individual differences, but they may be a little bit more pronounced when you're comparing one variation to another. Since we identified the cons of between subjects, there are ways around those cons. The best way to resolve the cons is randomly assigning participants to your conditions. Okay, so let's say you have 2 prototypes. You just randomly assign your participants to either version A or version B. Randomly assign them. Because now those individual differences are not the result of the condition, but since you randomly assigned them. So let's talk about the pros and cons of within subject studies. For within subject designs, the pros are that individual differences are reduced because the same participant is seeing all the versions. Okay, so if one person's really, really interesting with one variation, you can see their behavior reflected with all of the variations. So the individual differences aren't as pronounced. Within subjects designs, another pro is that you don't need as large of a sample size because they get to see all the conditions. Right? You don't have to pay more people to see the variations. You could just pay fewer people to see all the variations. Random noise is reduced. It kind of related to individual differences. And finally, you can compare data within the designs. Okay, that's one thing you cannot do with between subjects is that you can get comparison data, right? Within subjects, participants get to see more versions. Naturally, they're going to be like, well, compared to this one, it's blah, blah, blah. In between subjects, participants only see one version. They have nothing to compare it to. So you have no comparison data. So those are the pros of within subjects. The con, okay, there's always pros and cons. Since you have to, there's no way a participant is physically able to see all variations without being affected by a different one, okay? And the way you present, the order in which you present them may bias participants. So you see version A, and then they see version B. They're gonna compare it to version A. So this is known as order effects. The order of the conditions can, and they may affect their behavior. The performance also may be better because either, so order effects can come in many flavors, okay? It could be fatigue, right? I'm seeing one version, two versions, three versions, so on. I'm gonna get tired. And maybe by the fifth version, I don't wanna do this anymore. I'm like, oh, I'm bored, I don't wanna see anymore, right? Another thing another order effect flavor is that maybe by the fifth version, they get really good at the task that you presented them. For example, they've gotten practice by then. They could be fatigued, they could get better, they could be tired. So all of these are related to order effects, and that's one major con to the within subjects design. However, like I mentioned, with any con, there are workarounds, right? That's nice to know. In life, when going gets tough, there's always a way. Now, the way around that con for within subjects is something called counterbalancing. We can counterbalance the order that participants see a particular design. Counterbalancing. If you've never heard of this word, that's all right. We're going to talk about it in the next lesson.
Alrighty then.
So, as you can see, to answer your question, little Padawan, neither design is better than the other because it depends on what your goals are. It's great that there are ways to resolve the issues with both experimental designs, but what the heck is randomization? What's counterbalancing? Another great question, lovely Padawan researcher. See, there's so much to think about when planning research, right? What are we measuring? What are we manipulating? Do I get comparison data, or do I want to have task times? Do I want to focus on one variation? Do I want them to see all variations? And if I want them to see all variations, how do I get rid of that order effect?
Please stop!
This is the rigor that goes into research planning. And y'all are on the way to being badass UX researchers by knowing this. So with that, let's dive into counterbalancing and randomization.